Well, I'm very excited about talking about conflict because I'm very passionate about this topic. When I lived in Scotland, I was a volunteer with the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution, which is an organisation that's run by the Cyrenians to help reduce conflict because of the many issues and troubles it causes in society. And this is our inspiration. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. How amazing is that, to be called a child of God? So why should we be peacemakers? Well, there's lots of reasons. Unresolved conflict breaks relationships, and that has a negative effect on our mental health and also on our physical health and on our relational well-being and on our spiritual health. When I was working in Scotland, 4,000 teens and young people a year became homeless because of family conflict. And we know that many people leave our church because of the conflict in their homes or between them and other people in the church. So when the ASTR did some survey into the reason why people leave the Adventist church that was shared with us by David Trim when we had our reconciliation conference a little while ago, something else, maybe it was called, I can't remember the exact name, but anyway, they discovered that people's primary trigger for leaving the church was 62% conflict related. So their first reason for leaving church was to do with some issue with conflict in their home, within the church, between them and other people. When they looked at the secondary reason why people left the church, a third of people rated this as their second reason. And when it came to the third reason, about another third said, yes, it's conflict related. This is enormous for us. And when the Nurture and Retention Committee shared that with us, we could see the importance of helping to deal with conflict so that we can reduce the loss of people from our church and hopefully engage more people to come into our community. So what character strengths help us to resolve our conflicts better? Maybe humility does. Think about yourself on these different scales: pride versus humility, selfishness versus generosity, critical and judgmental attitudes versus accepting and forgiving, suspicious and cynical rather than believing the best in others, being hurtful and uncaring rather than being kind, needing to control and have my own way versus being able to compromise and collaborate. And we can see that those with the character strengths of humility, generosity, forgiveness, positive thinking, kindness, and teamwork, collaboration, they're going to help people make peace. They're going to be the peacemaking characters. And those other traits, they tend to cause division, cause conflict, and make it worse. We need to understand that conflict is normal. Every relationship experiences some degree of conflict because we're all different. We all have different ideas, needs, perspectives, passions, goals, and they're going to conflict at times with even the people we love the most. The quality of our relationship, though, affects how we will experience and handle those conflicts. Because a well-managed conflict, or difference, if that's a better word for it, helps us to explore the ways that we are different, to experience empathy for the other person when we hear their story, to understand how they see things, what their needs are, and how we can work with those and not cause them pain and distress, and to look for better solutions together. So the better our relationship, the more able we are to do the things, to manage our conflicts, which will then help us to have a warmer, stronger, closer, healthier relationship with fewer conflicts and less heated conflicts. But conflict is complex. Most conflicts are complex and messy. There are rarely any simple solutions. All kinds of known and unknown factors contribute to the things that happen when we have a conflict. And we have memories from the past, we have trauma experiences, we have pain, we have goals that we really want to reach. And together, when we bring those, it can get very messy. But today, I'm going to take a very different look at conflict from a different perspective to see what we can learn and how we can reduce some of our conflicts. Here are some basic conflict styles, and this is adapted from material used by the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution when they're training people to understand conflict. So basically there are two dimensions. There is a person's desire to win, their need to conquer, to control, to win the argument. And then along the bottom, there is the importance of the relationship. How caring are we? How committed are we to making sure this relationship is protected and safe and warm? And so probably the worst place to be in is the directing, controlling. When you have an argument, you want to win, the other person has to lose. Your desire to win is more important than anything else, including your relationship. And when we have our conflicts in those ways, it builds resentment in the other person. If you are always the loser, you get resentful. Eventually you give up trying, you distrust the person, you are afraid of them, you withdraw, and the relationship is even more broken. So you actually don't really win when you try to win. Then there is avoiding. I'm not that interested in winning. I'm not that caring about the relationship. We just both lose. We're just not going to address the issue. There'll be silence, coldness, unresolved conflict. And I sometimes meet couples who do not talk for 3 weeks after they have a conflict, because it's too difficult to know how to do that. Then we have harmonizing on the bottom right, where you don't want to win that badly, but you care about the relationship. So perhaps you give in to the other person regularly. Oh, you win, because I would rather stay connected to you and adapt my own needs somehow, or lose because I'm more involved and more focused on this caring relationship. Then in the middle, there is compromising. Well, I can win some and you can win some, but that can become competitive. Well, you won the last 2, so now it's my turn. And that can be a bit of a problem. The best thing to do is to go for collaboration where possible. It's not always possible, but when we have a situation where I win and you win, we both win. We both win, we both feel good, we both feel cared for. This takes a little more time, but it ends up with both people being happy once they've negotiated their needs. Now, there's times when we'll move between these for various reasons, like if I have a conflict with someone at the checkout in Tesco, I don't need to sustain this relationship. I can just go quiet and say, I'll let that go. That's not a big deal to me. There are times when I'm a mum and I'll say, you know what, you do this because I say so, because I know it's safe. And I'll be directing and controlling. And hopefully I won't build up resentment and distrust when I protect my children in that way. So sometimes we will move between these styles. But the one we should be working for the most is the collaborative one. I win, you win. And how do we do that? What I want to focus on this time is also conflict reduction. We focused many times on conflict resolution, on how we do mediation and how we fix things and how we negotiate. But actually, that's like providing fire engines rather than teaching people how to use matches safely. So it's much better to nurture warm and healthy relationships where we're less likely to have a conflict, and the conflicts that we do have are much easier to manage. And this is actually where we need to focus our attention and our actions in our homes, churches, and institutions, and to teach these skills to children and young people so they know how to reduce the painful, hurtful, relationship-breaking conflicts in their lives as well. The sooner we start to do this, the better. So prevention of conflict or reduction of conflict is much better than the cure. So my husband's a pastor, we've been working from home, and I have seen during this time how many hours he has spent trying to manage and solve the conflicts in his churches at this time. It takes an enormous amount of time and energy to deal with the conflicts that are happening because people don't feel cared for in the relationship. And especially now when we're doing a lot of church in a detached way on Zoom and separate from people, it is causing more conflict. And the more caring people could be, then the less conflict they are likely to have. So Sue Johnson is a family therapist, and she studied couples having arguments for 25 years. That kind of research would have done my head in, but she was intent on finding out what is really going on when couples argue. And the reason a lot of the work around conflict has focused on couples is because they're in long-term relationships. They often have a motivation to solve out their conflicts. And it's a good place to explore how conflict affects us and how we can resolve it. She discovered that most of the time what they were arguing about was not important. The big questions under those arguments were these: do you love me? Do you care about me? Do you appreciate me? Are you able to understand what I am feeling right now? Can you empathize with me? Are you willing and able to help me when I'm struggling here? Can't you see how much I'm doing and you're just sitting there? Are you willing to help me? And will you always be there for me? Can I trust you and depend on you? Or will you walk away when things get too difficult? These are the big questions. And yesterday we saw the video that Gabor shared of the still face. And even though that was a tiny baby, she was going through these questions in her head. She didn't have the words for them, but her reaction was saying this to her mother: do you love me? Do you care? Do you understand what's happening? Are you willing to help me right now? Oh, and maybe can I depend on you because this feels a little shaky? And that feeling of panic that causes that expression of emotion is what we feel as adults too when we feel alone, because it is not good for us to feel alone. It makes us feel very insecure, and God knew that right at the beginning in the Garden of Eden. So how do we live so we can answer the big questions every day? And so when those questions are answered in our heart, in our mind, in our relationships, it will reduce our sense of aloneness and panic. It will strengthen the attachment that Gabor spoke about yesterday. And the stronger the attachment we have together, the better we will manage our conflicts. So happy couples still have conflicts. Bernie and I still argue about things, but they're going to be less destructive and have less long-lasting implications. So happy couples know how to soothe each other, and they repair their relationships quickly after a conflict. It's really important to repair before bedtime. Some research with teens and parents showed that when they had an argument, if the parent could repair with the teen before bedtime, it did not have long-lasting effects on their mental health. But if it went over a night, it could trigger the teen into depression, anxiety, and many other issues. So the first way we can help to answer the big questions is by being loving and kind as often as possible in every small way we can. Also, when we show appreciation, it lowers the amount of conflict that we have. Resentment often builds bitter conflicts. But the more appreciated I feel by someone, the less likely I am going to fight with them. Be understanding and empathic. Think about what the other person is feeling. Listen to them. Express your compassion. Be sad when they're sad. Be happy when they're happy. When people experience that empathy, they know we care. They are less likely to have a conflict with us. Also, when we support each other, when we regularly ask, how can I help you? Do the things our partner hates, and don't let people struggle with the horrible tasks on their own. Collaborate as a team. Then we carry each other's burdens and fulfill the law of Christ, which is the law of love. So as a couple therapist, I realized that kindness is super important. Most couples come because they're having a conflict they can't resolve. And I might ask them questions like this. Tell me about the last time you did something kind for your spouse and the last time they did something kind for you. This often sadly stumps them. So we have to go back a bit and say, well, what are some of the kind things they did for you earlier in your marriage that you really appreciated? Would you be willing to try an experiment? Okay, secretly do something kind for each other at least once a day and write it down in a journal to bring back to me. And whenever you notice the other person has done something kind for you, show your appreciation. And again, write it down. And I know you don't feel like being kind right now because this isn't a great place to be, but do it anyway because feelings can follow actions, especially kindness. And God loves us first. That's his model too. We love first before we're loved back. So protect your relationship too, because relational insecurity, like still face experiment, fuels the conflict. Perfect love casts out fear. So make sure the people you are connected with are not frightened of you, because once we are frightened, we're also much more likely to have negative conflicts or to run away from them or to just go quiet and not resolve them. We need to understand how conflict escalates. And by that, we need to look at our brain. And it's our brain that can help us understand conflict and choose better responses to it. So when those big questions are not being answered in our lives, and maybe we experience criticism or a lack of support, lack of connection, little appreciation, it is much harder for our brains to handle conflict well because we are stressed, we are anxious, and we are afraid. And that stimulates the hypothalamus and the adrenal glands. And cortisol is released. And when cortisol is coursing through our body, we're more likely to become verbally aggressive, to shout, to abuse each other, to say things that are hurtful on purpose, and even become violent. And when our cortisol levels are raised for a long time, it is much harder for us to respond appropriately, to have empathy for others, to listen well to them, to access our sense of humor that could help us to solve the problem better. Because once our fight or flight reactions dominate our behavior, it becomes increasingly difficult to access the frontal lobes that can be thoughtful, unselfish, and stimulate caring ideas. So how do we help our brains to manage conflict better? Well, when we show empathy and experience it, when we show compassion and experience it, when there's kindness in the relationship, we feel supported and appreciated, the lovely hormone oxytocin pours into our body and it lights us up like a sunflower. It helps us to feel safe, happy, loved, and loving. So once we can do the things that stimulate that in the relationship or in ourselves by even doing it for the other person, we are in a better place to manage our differences. And when we feel safely connected to others, we are better able to connect with the reflective parts of our brain, to make wise choices, to respond well, creatively, humbly, and unselfishly to the challenges and conflicts. So how else can we help? Well, we need to pick our time because it helps our brain be in a good place when we are both relaxed to encounter the conflict conversation or talking about our differences and how they work together. Then think about the warmest and kindest way to approach the topic. That will help. Give the other person time to think about the issue before you discuss it with them. And if someone ambushes you with a potential conflict and you go, yikes, I never thought about that before, I have no idea what to say. Say something like this: I can see this is an important issue for you. I want to give it some serious thought as well. So is it okay if we discuss this tomorrow and try and buy yourself some time to feel calmer, to think of a more positive way of expressing your ideas in the situation? Another way that we can help to stimulate the oxytocin rather than the cortisol is warmly acknowledge the other person's hopes, desires, and challenges. Express your care for them, and then express your concerns in a kind and non-judgmental way. And this is often how Jesus related to people when he spoke to them and managed to help them through their challenges and difficulties. And this has been highlighted by Gottman and Gottman in The Science of Togetherness. Warm startup can help us solve our conflicts better because, again, it's accessing the oxytocin. Change your voice, whisper. Lower your voice instead of raising it. Speak calmly and kindly. Use respectful language because this will also lower the other person's stress level. The Bible is right when it says a gentle answer turns away wrath. So when we are gentle in our response, it soothes the other person, it lowers them down, and they can become calm too, whether they're a toddler, a teenager, a colleague, spouse, whoever they are. A gentle answer is really powerful. And listen well, because when we are listened to well and we know the other person understands our situation, that is really healing. So we need to listen carefully, really focus, check that we've understood exactly what they've said. Because when I say, that sounds as if you're saying that, or if I write down their points on a sheet of paper so they can see what I'm hearing and what I've written down, they can see and know that I have understood them. And when we listen to their viewpoint first and calm them down, they are more likely to listen to us. Then when we have a concern, we need to express it warmly, politely, respectfully, clearly, and collaboratively. And this is something that I have generated. It's basically a non-complaint form that I help my couples use. So if they want to complain about each other or nag each other, I say, hang on a minute, we're not going to use that language here. I'm going to give you this format, and I want you to rewrite your complaint as a polite request. In this specific situation, keep it specific. When this specific things happen, I feel because. And it would really help me if you would do this specific thing instead. And then I could help you by doing this. So it becomes a win-win. This is just one idea. What ideas do you have that would help us to work this out together? Once I came up with this, it's really helped me and Bernie, because Bernie doesn't get nagged as much now, because when I feel a nag coming on, I formulate it in this way, and tends to have a much better response. So honor one another above yourselves, it says in Romans 12:10. And this is a formula for doing just that when we need to have a discussion about a conflict or a difference between us. Then we need to use language that connects us. We can solve this together, not, oh, that's your problem, you solve it. When we admit our contribution to the problem and share the responsibility for solving it, then it puts us both on the same side, both with the desire to win together. We need to change the words we use, not you do this, but we, us. This is our problem. We can solve it together. Use the word and rather than but. This is really powerful. So you want this and I want this. How can we have both? And so if you say you want this, but I want that, it immediately puts you into opposite sides and nurtures the conflict rather than the collaboration. Aim for win-win. This is so important. I see so many people who are so intent on winning that they don't mind if they lose the relationship. I met a man who once told me, I have won every argument I have ever had. And I thought to myself, I don't think I'm going to spend much time talking with you, because what's the point? You're just going to win every time. And he actually lost every important relationship because for wanting to win all the time was so destructive. Because when we win an argument, we often lose the vital trust and closeness in the relationship. The loser is then hurt and sad and may distance themselves from us to feel safe. And they eventually give up trying to talk, trying to deal with things. And if they feel they can never win, they may just walk away. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but to the interest of others. Know how to soothe each other. That's really important. When we soothe each other, and we're much less likely to have arguments together. And when we are getting into a conflict, if we can find a way to soothe the other person, that will help us resolve it better. Maintain a warm sense of humor, laugh about your problems, go make a British cup of tea and sit down together, and get plenty of sleep, because tiredness makes you more irritable and argumentative. So we've all done this, really, brainstorm creative solutions when we have a problem. And so we get people to make a list of all their ideas, whatever they are. It's good to have some funny, crazy ideas too, to add some humor into the situation. And then each person rates each idea out of 10 to see which gets the highest score. And then choose something that will work for both of you. And then try an experiment. It is just an experiment. It is not forever. Try the idea for at least a week. Then evaluate it, improve on it, or choose another option from the list. Jonathan Haidt, in The Righteous Mind, he writes about why good people are divided by politics and religion. And what he says is this. So he's talked about how people can be both passionate about God from the right wing and the left wing, and they argue together in the middle. And he says, this is what we need to do. The next time you find yourself seated beside someone from another matrix, give this a try. Don't just jump right in. Don't bring up morality until you have found a few points of commonality. So that's the connection between you, the oxytocin part, or in some other ways, established a bit of trust. And when you do bring up issues of morality, try to start with some praise, some appreciation, or a sincere expression of interest. I love what he says then. We're all stuck here for a while, so let's try to work it out. So we have church conflicts. And if any of you have never experienced a church conflict, well, I want to know what you're doing so I can learn from how you're managing them. But Ellen White says this: when united with Christ, members will solve church problems with sympathy, tenderness, and love. The Bible sets before us a model church. They are to be in unity with each other and with God. When believers are united in Christ, the living vine, the result is that they are one with Christ, full of sympathy and tenderness and love. Wouldn't we all like to be part of a church that is full of sympathy and tenderness and love and unity? And then she says this: and when you do go to those who you think are doing wrong, you must have the spirit of meekness, of kindness, be full of mercy and good fruits, which is basically answering those big questions that we spoke about. When you go to resolve differences, make sure that first you have done that connection, answered those big questions, let them feel cared for and loved, stimulated the oxytocin, and then you can have a good conversation together. There are times when we have unresolvable conflicts. Not everything can be solved. If Bernie wants to live in America and I want to live in England, that is unresolvable. There cannot be a win-win. One person has to lose. We cannot live in the middle of the Atlantic. And if we go to America and I lose, or we stay in Britain and Bernie loses, the one who has lost out on their desire, their vision, their hopes, the other person needs to show compassion and understanding as much as possible to the person who's losing out in the situation, to show comfort to them when they're distressed and not just abandon them in their distress. Do whatever you can as often as possible to help them cope. As the Bible says, bear one another's burdens, whatever they are. So this creates a virtuous circle. Well-managed conflicts bring us closer together. They increase our understanding of each other's needs and views. They help us to develop unselfish win-win ways of solving our problems. And when we do that, we feel more able to solve our problems. We are more open to love and kindness, and that actually helps to reduce the hurtful conflicts in our relationship. By starting with the kindness, the understanding, answering the big questions, it's a virtuous circle which spirals around, and each time we go through, we manage our conflicts better, we understand each other better, we are closer together, we are more connected, and that is the goal. We can be more intimate in every aspect of our lives. This isn't new. Jesus knew this. Paul knew this. Paul described this in Romans 12, and he talked about the last third of the chapter is all about how to have healthy relationships in a church community. As he went around planting churches, he knew one of the most important things that he needed to do was to make sure that each church was a caring community that could sustain the love, grow the love, and expand the love to involve new people in that community. And this is what Jesus said: as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. Be in that place of oxytocin, because Jesus has answered all those big questions for us in the biggest possible way. And if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. And I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete, because we experience so much more joy in a peaceful, loving relationships than when they're torn apart with conflict. And Jesus says very simply, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. So this is a different way of thinking about conflict, starting at the prevention, reduction side, rather than how do we solve the conflict in negotiation. That's a whole different ballgame, a whole different webinar perhaps. But what have you learned today that might change the course of your conflicts? How can you be the peacemaker God calls you to be where you are when you look at the conflicts around you? And what can we do together, the TED, the EUD, Europe, the World Church, to create warm and caring churches. These ones where the big questions are answered and we don't leak people in floods because of the conflict in our churches and in their relationships. How can we create these warm, caring churches, organizations, and families where these hurtful conflicts are much less likely and much more able to be managed well? So here are some useful resources. Kindness is so vital that I developed resources for something called Live Kind. And if you go there on the TED website, Family Ministries Resources, and look for Live Kind, you will find literally hundreds of ideas for being kind. So if you're not quite sure what to do, there's plenty there for you. The website for Scottish Conflict Centre that I worked for is there, and they have plenty of good materials. And their focus this year is on nurturing kindness to reduce the conflict in society. There's a really fun quiz called Keep the Heat, which is Scottish for stay calm, to help you find out your conflict style. And there are other resources there as well. A free app, an app called Two Can Together, and books, Everybody Wins and Created for Connection. So let's just pray as we close. Father God, help us to learn today. Open our hearts. Help us to be the people who are the agents of change that bring about more caring, loving communities where we can reduce the pain of conflict and the distress and aloneness that causes. Through Jesus' name, amen.